For 6,000 cycles, the stars had known only fire. I remember the first time I looked upon the war from orbit, twin armadas locked in orbit around the dying star of Rithis 9. The Dominion banners burned crimson, their ships a lattice of living metal. Across from them, the Ascendancy's fleets glowed silver blue, their weapons folding light itself into blades. Between them hung the corpses of worlds, stripped of oceans and memory. We, the Coral, did not fight. We watched. We recorded. We told ourselves that neutrality was wisdom, that observation was survival. Yet with each passing century, the war became less a conflict and more a condition of the universe itself, like gravity or entropy. Every truce dissolved into betrayal. Every peace summit ended with plasma and bone. Even the gods abandoned us, their temples empty, their prayers unanswered. We chronicled it all until the act of recording felt like complicity. Victory was a myth. Hope, a forgotten dialect. Then one cycle, something impossible happened. The comms lattice, the one no signal had breached in millennia, flickered. A transmission, faint and analog, crossed the void. The encryption was primitive, almost laughable. We thought it debris, noise, until the translator parsed the message, requesting entry into the Galactic Accords Defense Council. The chamber fell silent. The Dominion's envoys hissed. The Ascendancy's delegates scoffed. Who would dare interrupt eternity with such simplicity? The origin tag blinked across the main hollow. Source, Sol System. Classification, human. 1,000 counselors laughed. I remember their voices echoing off the crystalline walls, condescending, indulgent, afraid to admit the tremor behind their amusement. Humans, the minor species from the spiral's forgotten edge. Barely interstellar, barely worth acknowledgement, yet our sensors did not laugh. The instruments began to distort, their readings erratic. Energy flux where none should exist. Temporal drift in the message stream, as if the signal had arrived before it was sent. We dismissed it as noise. We always dismissed what we did not understand. They sent no threats, no ultimatums, no boasts of power. Merely a request. Calm. Unassuming. Still, there was something in that calm that unsettled even the Dominion warlords. The humans were granted a token seat, observer status only, a gesture of mockery disguised as diplomacy. The counselors expected them to watch, to learn, to fade. I remember the day they arrived. Their ships were small, unadorned, their hulls patched with scars that told of ancient battles fought with iron and radiation. No banners, no gold, no pride, only endurance. The human delegation entered the council chamber with a strange stillness. They bowed slightly, not in submission, but in recognition. Their eyes? Gods, their eyes were old. Older than their years, older than any species I'd seen. They said nothing for hours, simply listened. Every counselor who spoke before them grew uneasy beneath that silent regard. The Ascendancy's High Chancellor whispered to me, "They look at us as though we are children." We laughed then, too, because laughter was easier than fear. When the session adjourned, the humans gave a single nod. No argument, no proposal, only that quiet acceptance, as if they had seen everything that was to come and merely waited for the clock to catch up. Later, in the observatory, I replayed the transmission that started it all. I slowed the waveform, isolated its frequencies, and found patterns hidden beneath the static. Not language, not code. Something else. Harmonics that resonated with our planetary magnetic fields. Our instruments hummed for hours after the playback ended. That night, as I drifted among the data streams, a thought came unbidden. What if the war we'd endured for 6,000 cycles was already over? And what if the humans had simply come to tell us? The Dominion's fleets moved again the next cycle. The Ascendancy prepared another retaliation. The war continued, blind to the quiet presence now seated in our chamber, but I could feel it, in the silence between words, in the hum of our dying star. Something vast was shifting, something inevitable. The calm had come, and none of us yet understood that it was the silence before the detonation of history itself. They came without ceremony. No banners, No war drums, no blinding aura of superiority, only quiet arrival. Their ships were small, functional, and imperfect, their hulls bearing scars that spoke of battles older than our recorded epochs. They looked fragile to us, metal patched with alloy and faith. Yet when they entered orbit, the void itself seemed to hesitate. The Dominion's admirals mocked their fleet composition. A handful of cruisers, outdated drives, kinetic weapons instead of quantum artillery. The Ascendancy analysts called them obsolete. Even our own Chiral observers recorded them as a curiosity, a primitive echo amidst empires of light. But the humans didn't seem to notice our disdain. Or perhaps they didn't care. I saw them for the first time in the council chamber, walking side by side, tall, quiet figures in dark uniforms with no insignia. No rank markers, no glittering medals, just threadbare fabric and purpose. They took their seats without speaking. Around them, the chamber pulsed with the overlapping languages of the galaxy's oldest powers, clicking, humming, roaring, debating how to respond to the Dominion's renewed offensive. Entire sectors had fallen. 20 more worlds turned to dust, and the humans listened. For hours, they said nothing. Their stillness was almost offensive in a room accustomed to chaos. Their silence drew attention, then discomfort, then fear. It was as if they were not attending the council, but measuring it. When the Ascendancy's High Marshal slammed his claws on the crystal dais and demanded consensus, a single human finally spoke. A male by the sound of his voice, level, unhurried, with an accent that carried the strange softness of Earth's ancient oceans. "We can end this war," he said, "but you must clear the battlefield." The words landed like gravity. For a moment, no one moved. Then the laughter came, sharp, echoing, venomous. The Karthik admiral, all fangs and gold, leaned forward. "You? End a war that has lasted longer than your species has had cities?" The human didn't flinch. "Yes." The Tsari delegate spat a jet of phosphor across the chamber floor, a traditional insult. The human simply stepped aside, eyes steady. "We require 3 hours," he added, "and no one else in the conflict zone." The laughter became howling. Some delegates slammed the table. Others cursed the arrogance. The Dominion's warlord even rose to his feet, his armor cracking with amusement. But I could not laugh, because for an instant, a heartbeat between ridicule and rage, I caught a glimpse of the human's eyes. They were not bright with pride or fury. They were tired, deeply, immeasurably tired. The kind of exhaustion only a species that had survived itself could know. Those eyes belonged not to conquerors, but to mourners. When the uproar finally subsided, the human merely nodded, as though the reaction had been anticipated. "We will begin when the evacuation is confirmed," he said quietly. Then he turned to leave. The Ascendancy's chancellor called after him. "You think you can win a war that consumed 10,000 worlds? With what? Your relic ships? Your silence?" The human paused at the threshold. "Not with weapons," he said, "with clarity." Then he was gone. After the humans departed, the council chamber erupted in disbelief. Some accused them of mockery. Others suspected espionage. But beneath the fury, an undercurrent of unease began to flow. Our sensors, still tracking the human fleet, showed strange anomalies. Distortions in subspace, faint fluctuations in probability fields. Their ships weren't moving, yet gravitational readings around them began to shift, as if reality itself bent a fraction of a degree too far toward them. I sent a report to the High Observatory. It was dismissed. "Technological interference," they said. "Human equipment is crude, but crude things don't make the universe tremble." 3 hours later, their fleet vanished from our scopes. Not jumped, vanished. Every Dominion and Ascendancy array that scanned the sector returned data corruption, white noise, or impossible coordinates. Even the stars behind them flickered like candlelight. In a wind we could not feel, our instruments began to scream, a cascade of alarms in frequencies we'd never programmed. Something had begun. And in that moment, I understood the meaning of their words. Clear the battlefield. It wasn't a request. It was mercy. It began with silence, not the silence of peace, nor of calm, but of something vast inhaling. a stillness that smothered the stars. At first, we thought our sensors had failed. The Dominion fleet, spread across 8 sectors, simply stopped. No acceleration burns, no transmissions, no weapons discharge. Thousands of vessels, frozen mid-maneuver, as if time itself had forgotten to advance. The Ascendancy's commanders shouted across the channels. They demanded telemetry, confirmation, anything to break the stillness. None came. Even the Dominion's own distress frequencies fell mute. And then the light changed. The stars dimmed. Not obscured, not eclipsed. Absent. We checked the visual feeds. The constellations themselves appeared to fade, as though the void had swallowed their history. Gravitational shears erupted in every direction, folding our maps into nonsense. Entire sectors blinked in and out of measurable existence, and through it all, the humans did not move. Their ships hung in formation like dark punctuation marks against an unraveling sentence. Unarmed, unblinking, waiting. The first readings from the quantum layers arrived minutes later. Our observatories went blind trying to process them. Entropy was reversing in pockets. Probability fields were collapsing in guided patterns, not random, not chaotic, but intentional, as if something was rewriting the rules of chance itself. Impossible, one of our scientists whispered. But impossibility was already irrelevant. I watched the feed from the Dominion front lines. Their dreadnoughts, great beasts of alloy and hatred, shimmered once, flickered, and were gone. Not destroyed, not scattered. Erased. The space they had occupied no longer registered as real. Matter, energy, even memory, gone. For centuries we had imagined the end of the war as a grand explosion of violence, a cosmic final battle. But the humans' war was surgical, precise, elegant, terrifying. Within the first hour, 6 Dominion armadas ceased to exist. The Ascendancy forces, terrified of the same fate, attempted to withdraw, but their jump calculations dissolved mid-equation. The coordinates no longer resolved because the destination sectors no longer existed. I tried to comprehend it. I failed. On the command deck of our observation cruiser, we watched space itself buckle in on invisible seams. The humans' fleet began to shift, not physically but mathematically. Their ships folded, elongated, blurred into higher symmetry. Dimensions flickered around them like light refracting through an ancient prism. "Are they moving?" someone asked. "No," I said. "They're calculating." Weapons we could not detect executed commands our physics could not describe. There were no energy readings, no heat, no emission trails, only outcomes. Where Dominion fleets once drifted, there was now only perfect blackness. Not void. Absence. The Dominion's homeworld went dark in the second hour. The pulse of its atmosphere registered a fractional delay, as though it took the planet time to understand it was no longer real. The Ascendancy's chancellor demanded the humans cease their actions. He broadcast across all channels, "You are violating cosmic law. You are unmaking existence." The human reply came through, quiet and uninflected. Negative. "We are restoring baseline coherence." Then nothing. Even their voices felt surgical, detached, efficient, absolute. The third hour began, and panic swept the accord. The Dominion had vanished from our maps. Their empire, 5,000 years of conquest and cruelty, erased in less time than it took light to cross a single system. The humans did not celebrate. They did not speak again. I watched their ships retract from higher geometry, refolding into familiar shapes. There was a beauty to it, like watching a god sheathe its blade. The distortions faded, the stars returned, and the silence of annihilation gave way to the quiet hum of restored reality. Then, finally, a single transmission echoed across the void, open band, unencrypted, spoken in a language translated into every known dialect. Conflict concluded. Suggest humanitarian assistance. The channel remained open for precisely 8 seconds. Then it closed. I could not move. No one could. The entire Council fleet hung suspended in disbelief. The Dominion, gone. The war over, not through negotiation, not through mercy, through something beyond either. Our historians would later name the event the 3-Hour War. But those of us who witnessed it never called it that. We called it the correction. When the first data packets arrived from the human fleet, they contained fragments of terminology beyond our comprehension: strategic coherence realignment, temporal error compensation, entropy balance protocols. It wasn't destruction. It was reconfiguration. They hadn't come to wage war. They had come to tidy up the universe's mess, like custodians cleaning after an endless banquet of chaos. I tried to reach their command ship, a small vessel designated Solace 3. It did not respond. Its coordinates jittered, drifting slightly outside measurable space-time. And then, one by one, their ships began to fade. Not warp. Not vanish. Fade like echoes finally reaching silence. No radiation. No trace. No farewell. Just the lingering hum of existence made right. Our science divisions are still decoding the event logs. The deeper we analyze, the more impossible it becomes. Probability collapse at quantum scale. Directed, stabilized, concluded. They didn't destroy the Dominion. They removed its statistical relevance. The ascendancy demanded to know if the humans could do it again. I prayed they would never need to, because in their precision, I saw something colder than cruelty. Not malice, not vengeance, but the clarity of a surgeon who knows exactly where to cut and what must be excised to make the patient live. In the end, the humans did not fight a war. They performed a correction, and we, the witnesses, could only stand in awe of beings who treated extinction like maintenance. As the last Dominion signal faded from the records, I realized something deeper, darker. They hadn't joined the war to win it. They'd joined to end it. We had imagined victory would be beautiful. Trumpets, banners, the slow and glorious sunrise of peace. But when the war ended, there was no music, only the thin, broken whisper of static across the channels once filled with screams. The aftermath was worse than the war. Entire fleets of the Ascendancy and the Dominion, allies, enemies, all, were simply gone. The coordinates where they had once existed now returned null results, not debris, not wreckage, just blank data. Even memory felt uncertain, as though reality itself hesitated to remember what had been erased. Our archives called them dark coordinates. I called them graves without bodies. We demanded answers from the humans, but none came. Their ships floated in the aftermath, hulls scorched, geometry still humming from impossible stress. They did not celebrate. They did not even debrief. Quietly, methodically, they began transmitting aid protocols to surviving colonies, food shipments, atmospheric stabilizers, med drones. They had ended a 6,000-cycle war, and then immediately started rebuilding what remained, not for gratitude. Not for recognition, simply because it needed doing. I remember approaching one of their envoys, a woman they called Commander Reyes. Her ship was small, angular, still humming faintly with residual anomalies. When she emerged, she carried no weapon, only a data pad and eyes that looked as if they'd seen the birth and death of universes. "Commander Reyes," I said, "the Council requires a statement." "What happened here? What did you do?" She regarded me for a long moment, long enough for the silence to grow uncomfortable, sacred even. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but heavy with something beyond words. "You should rebuild differently this time," she said. "You were never meant to fight forever." Her words struck harder than any weapon. "Not an accusation, a plea," I pressed further. "What did you use? What kind of weapon can erase entire fleets without a trace?" For a heartbeat, I thought she might ignore me. Then she smiled, faint, tired, almost kind. "We didn't use a weapon," she said. "We used a decision," and she walked away. A decision. That phrase haunted me. What decision could bend physics, could unmake empires? Was it some hidden machine, a godlike algorithm, a collective psychic will? Or was it something simpler, and far more terrible, that the universe itself obeyed? The humans never explained. Days passed. Their ships finished repairs. They transmitted reconstruction data to every surviving species, schematics for hospitals, water purifiers, anti-radiation shields. Every file signed with a single phrase: "For use in rebuilding, not in conquest." Then, as quietly as they had arrived, they began to leave. No announcement. No farewell. One by one, their vessels faded into jump space, leaving behind nothing but stabilized gravity wells and repaired orbital infrastructure. Even their debris was gone, as if they refused to leave behind any trace of war. Before their final departure, a transmission was detected on all known frequencies. It carried no encryption, no code, just a single line, spoken in a Terran tongue so ancient even our translators hesitated before rendering it. Never make us care about war again. We archived it as a warning, though I suspect it was something else. A confession. When their last ship vanished from sensors, I stood on the observation deck of Karel Station, watching the void where they had been. The stars had grown quiet again, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of realization, that we had been children in a playground built atop a god's shadow. For centuries we had glorified war, calling it necessity, destiny, evolution. Humanity ended it as if turning off a light. And now, there was nothing left to fight. The Dominion was gone. The Ascendancy fractured, their fleets scattered across phantom coordinates. The Accord met in silence, unable to draft a treaty for a war that no longer existed. I still remember the way Commander Reyes said it. A decision. Perhaps the weapon was never technology. Perhaps it was resolve. The simple, terrifying unity of a species that decided it was done tolerating madness. Humans did not rewrite the laws of physics. They rewrote the meaning of finality. When the data logs ended and the human transmissions went silent, our instruments still caught one anomaly, faint. Rhythmic pulses coming from the void near Sol, not a signal, not communication. Just a repeating heartbeat, steady and infinite, as if the universe itself was remembering them. Some nights, when I replay that pulse through the observatory's speakers, I can almost hear the words behind it. We are finished with war. Are you? Centuries have passed, and still the archives whisper of the 3-hour war. In the great halls of the Karel Academy, holograms shimmer with reconstructed timelines, luminous spirals of data that refuse to align. Historians, physicists, theologians, they all gather beneath those flickering lights, arguing endlessly over what truly happened that day. Was it technology? Philosophy? A miracle? Every simulation fails. Every model collapses into paradox before reaching the 3rd hour. The closer we come to the truth, the more the equations devour themselves. It is as though the universe refuses to let us understand how humanity did it. Only that it was done. Some say the humans learned to command probability itself, that they discovered the language of existence, the syntax of outcomes, and rewrote it. Others believe it was something spiritual, that they ascended not beyond physics, but beyond the idea of violence, that they found the axis of all conflict and turned it until it broke. The religious sects call them the quiet gods. The military calls them the error. But I call them something simpler, inevitable. When I read the ancient transcripts, the ones pulled from the wreckage of the council's vaults, I see a pattern no one else seems to notice. Humanity never spoke of domination, or vengeance, or retribution. Their language was not of superiority, but of completion. They weren't trying to win. They were trying to finish. The last of their messages still drifts through the void, faint and fractured, repeating across forgotten relay stations. Most beings dismiss it as background radiation, but when filtered correctly, beneath the static, you can still hear their voice. We're done fighting. The translation teams have argued for centuries about its meaning. Some interpret it as a declaration of peace. Others as a threat. To me, it is neither. It is the sound of a species that looked upon eternity, saw endless cycles of death and pride, and finally chose to stop. Wars do not end when one side dies. They end when one side refuses to play by the same rules. That was their lesson. Their final gift, or perhaps their curse. No one dares wage war now. Not even the Council. The Ascendancy's fleets lie dormant, their war codes deleted. The Dominion's remnants drift as hollow monuments. Even the Karel, once archivists of endless conflict, have turned to the quiet work of restoration. Peace, real peace, feels wrong at first, unfamiliar, like walking on a planet after generations in orbit. But we endure it, because somewhere, in the cold silence of the outer rim, humanity still exists. Their worlds are dark, their systems quiet, they speak to no one. Yet across the communications network, stray bursts of encrypted Terran code appear at random intervals. Always the same frequency, always the same phrase. We remember what you became. Sometimes, those transmissions are accompanied by strange gravitational ripples, soft and deliberate, as though the humans are watching, listening, measuring whether we've learned, and so we rebuild under their unseen gaze. Entire generations now grow up never knowing war. They study it as an ancient myth, something barbaric our ancestors once indulged in before the Quiet Ones rewrote the meaning of victory. Every year, on the anniversary of the 3-Hour War, the galaxy dims its lights. Across every station, every outpost, every homeworld, we observe the pause. No transmissions, no travel, no trade. Just silence. An echo of the day humanity ended the noise. In the archives of my order, we keep one relic. A single data crystal recovered from a Terran outpost on Titan. It holds no schematics, no weapon blueprints, no technological secrets. Only a recording. Commander Reyes, her voice faint, her expression unreadable. If you must learn from us, learn this. Compassion is the final weapon. Everything else is delay. I have listened to that message 1,000 times. Each time, it feels heavier. The galaxy thrives now, united by a peace enforced not through fear, but through remembrance. We remember what it took. The silence, the erasure, the glimpse of something greater than war. The humans are gone, but their absence rules more powerfully than any empire. Their stillness shapes policy, faith, and philosophy. Their warning lingers like gravity itself, and every time a new species rises, hungry for conquest, the Council takes them to the archives, to the hollow where the Dominion once stood. There, beneath a dead star, they are shown the coordinates that no longer exist. The lesson is always the same. Power is not the ability to destroy. It is the choice to stop. Perhaps that is why the humans sleep. Their systems dark, their worlds untouched. They are not hiding. They are resting, waiting for the galaxy to forget so that they can remind us again. And if that day ever comes, gods help us. Because when humanity decides to care again, the universe will have to rewrite itself once more. The archives hum softly tonight. The air tastes of cold metal and memory. Before me hover the spectral echoes of fleets that no longer exist, vast armadas of the Ascendancy and the Dominion, rendered in ghost light, suspended in perfect stillness. Children walk among them, their small hands passing through holograms of ships older than their civilizations. They ask the same question every cycle. Why did the humans do it? I have no answer that comforts. Only reverence. We remember them not as monsters, not as gods, but as something far more unsettling. Mortals who looked at infinity and made it blink. 3 hours. That was all it took. 3 hours to end 6,000 years of war. 3 hours to teach every sentient species the anatomy of fear. 3 hours to remind the galaxy that conscience, when wielded without compromise, is the sharpest blade in existence. They didn't scream. They didn't boast. They didn't even stay to watch. They just finished. And in doing so, they rewrote the moral gravity of the stars. Since that day, no empire has dared raise a fleet without invoking the memory of the Quiet Ones. No commander gives an order without glancing once toward the outer rim, as if expecting to see those dark, patient ships unfold from the void again. We, the Karel, have built entire doctrines around restraint, caution, and humility. Words that once felt alien to us. Perhaps that was humanity's true weapon, not annihilation, but reflection. The way they forced us to see ourselves through their eyes, and recoil. They called it strategy. We call it the quiet apocalypse. Every year, on the anniversary of the 3-Hour War, the Council convenes not to celebrate, but to remember. We dim the stars, We silence our networks. And we listen, because somewhere beyond the rim they are still listening too. We send no messages. We ask no questions. We simply wait and hope they never have reason to care again. And yet, some nights the static returns, faint, rhythmic, human, all systems nominal. Standing by, it is not a threat, not even a warning. Just a reminder that they are still there, that they can return if the galaxy forgets what fear taught us. In the end, perhaps humanity never wanted power. Perhaps they only wanted quiet. But peace, true peace, is terrifying, because it carries the echo of what it cost to earn it. And as I stand beneath the glow of vanished fleets, I finally understand. The day humanity joined the war was the day the galaxy learned fear. The day they ended, it was the day we learned why. They called it Tuesday. We call it the day the stars stood still.